Good evening, everyone. My name is Pinnicky. This is our Monday evening strategy call. And I think a lot of us went on the company call today. And I think it was surprising. And it was also a breath of fresh air because the call was done and dusted in 10 minutes. And it went through, the different parts of the plan, what the system is, what the community reward points are, etc. But when we went through that call, I thought, wow, 10 minutes. I was almost lost thinking, God, what do I do with the rest of the time? Because that's not what this is about. As long as the information is out there, we know what to do with it. That's the most important bit. What I did realize, which was really interesting, I realized at the end of the call is now compare old to new. So if you take Hyperverse, Hyperfund, Hypercapital, all the other versions of whatever it was called, people would come and say, oh, do this, put some funds in here and you get 3 times and this, that, and the other. Now they have to buy a passport. That's the clever part. If you don't buy that passport, you don't get access to the citizen welfare packages. And that's what makes this so interesting, because that means you can't just come in and say, well, I'm going to give you X amount. Can you go and do it for me? No, you've got to buy a passport. And they go, well, what's a passport for? Well, if you're not interested in the passport, there's no point doing the rest of it. And that's the clever part. There's a barrier first before you even enter. So you can't get in unless you join this club and you pay the 120 USDT to get a green box and an NFT. And they'll say, well, what's that for? Well, if you don't get the NFT, you can't come in. It's a bit like saying, if you haven't got a key, you can't get in the door. So that's what's interesting about this is now there's a barrier. So, people can't just come in and say, well, so-and-so told me. So, well, hang on, did you buy a passport? Yes. Well, what did you buy that for then? So now, you're qualifying people before they even enter into HyperNation. So let's just share screen. A few interesting things I wanted to cover today. In the past, I've covered a company called Evergrande. This is one of the biggest property companies in China. And they are basically in debt to the tune of $300 billion. And this is 30% of China's economy. And you think, what's that got to do with HyperNation? And the answer is literally everything in the world is connected. In one way or another, it's connected. So China, Evergrande company, who basically, they issue bonds when they want to borrow money. So this is where, in a way, when you look at Hyperbond, it gives you more of an idea of what Hyperbond could possibly be. So China Evergrande issued bonds so they could go and expand. And guess what happened? Now the company has failed. They've reneged on the bond, but also the company has even had their headquarters seized by the lenders. And you might think, well, okay. So how does this affect everyone? Well, actually, it does in a way, because now this company, China's property market is crashing like there is no tomorrow. And guess what? So is the rest of the world's property market too. And the daftest thing is, this is Bank of America. And this is literally fresh news. Bank of America is offering 0 down payment mortgages in certain Black and Hispanic communities. Why they only pick on these communities when it should be open to everyone? That's another political story. But has anybody ever heard of being able to get a mortgage with 0 down? Nothing at all. No deposit whatsoever. Why would the banks do that if the banks are doing really well? That's almost like Big Mac and McDonald's are doing really well, so they've decided to give burgers away. Does that make any sense? It doesn't. But it's not just 0 down payment for mortgages. There's no closing costs. And in certain neighborhoods, a new program designed to chip away inequality. There's a new loan launched this week, requires no credit score, no mortgage insurance. So literally nothing at all. You could just say, I like that house. Can I have the keys, please? And they would agree to the mortgage payments. I don't think anybody's ever heard of anything like that. It doesn't even exist, or it didn't. This only tells me one story. Initially, you might look at it and go, wow, what a great idea. It's not a great idea when interest rates are going up. Because guess what? When you take out one of these mortgages, the interest rate is variable. That means that as the interest rate goes up, so do the payments. So how do the banks win out of this? Just think, you take out a mortgage, you make monthly payments, and let's say if you even pay it for 6 months, and if the bank repossesses it, you lose the house, but you've also lost the payments you made. Whose money was lost? Yours. And this is where, something might look wonderful when you look at it. The question is it really? And it's, these things are worth knowing, because at the end of the day, all of this affects us. Because if you're looking to buy a property or buy assets or anything like that, you need to know what's happening in the wider world. And so when Mr. H talks about inequality and all these kinds of things, corruption and slavery, that's really what you're looking at here. When you look at Evergrande, that's corruption, because they basically kept building properties and kept selling them. And eventually they got to a point where the housing market crashed and they couldn't supply the properties. People in China have stopped paying their mortgages. So now it's an even bigger problem. So the company's headquarters have been seized. Bank of America are telling you everything's wonderful. They're so good, they're going to give you a 0 payment down mortgage. Sounds like a wonderful gift. The truth is, they're in deep problems as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be giving you a mortgage with no money down whatsoever. So when somebody is literally giving you something, saying, here you are, you can have this, then you need to double check what you're actually being given. And this is a great search engine called FreeSpoke. Definitely worth looking at. So it's free spoke, S-P-O-K-E. Now, if I typed house market crash looming into Google, I guarantee you, I probably won't get as many honest answers as this place, because this place is literally, is a house market crash looming? Here's what experts say. Will the real estate market crash in 2022? Housing market crash. Is the market about to crash? Sell my house hits its highest point in the US internet history. And that's 3 days ago. Key indicator hints America is headed for the worst real estate crash ever. And guess what? If it happens in the USA, it's going to happen all over the world. So when Mr. H is telling you about, these things are bad, corruption and all the rest of it, the banking system and the elite will lie to you right up until the very last minute. And then they'll go, we didn't expect that, which is a total lie. If you know that you're overspending in your household, you know that sooner or later, somebody's going to come knocking at your door. So that's quite important too to know. So what else was I going to cover? Oh, yes. Okay. So now we go to Hyperbond. This just makes me laugh, actually. Because guess what? The company have released Hyperbond. Hyperbond is a utility token. In other words, let's break it down to simplicity. What is a utility? It's something you use. It's your tool belt. If you had tools and you had a belt, that's a utility belt because it's got your tools on it. So it's used for something else. That's why the company has never actually said, go and take your HB and go and sell it on the market. Because these figures might look wonderful, but look at this. This is when we talk about liquidity. This is important. If you look here, and I covered this on one of the previous calls, the amount of USD that's in this pool is $339. And there's 89,000 HB on there. So if you look at these trades here, somebody here has taken 5,000 Hyperbond and bought them for $18. He got a bargain. Somebody here has sold 4,464 and got $15. I think most places $15 is not really going to pay a lot of anything. But you can see there are people literally selling these and there's no market for them whatsoever. So somebody's picking up bargains because they're thinking, wow, these are cheap. Now, the only thing is, don't take your Hyperbond and put it into your HyperNation account, because we have had people who've been told you can't do this because it's an internal utility token at this moment in time. So think of it this way. Let's say you've got 1,000 HB and you're now being allowed to use 80 HB against a 400 USDT package. So it's got a value of internally $1. If you sell 80 HB on here, you'll be lucky if you get 20 cents. So now internally it has more value because the company have stated that's what they've allowed you to do. So why would you even put them on here with nobody ready to even buy? The minute somebody sells more, what will happen is the price will go down, because this is the way a liquidity pool works. It's always a balance. If there's 10,000 HB and $100, then the minute you put more dollars in, the price of HB drops, because there's now more. If you put more HB in, the price goes down and the number of USD increases. So it always keeps the balance. That's why a liquidity pool works. And the best example I can give you is when we look at HNT. So if people say, well, okay, where's the proof there's any funds to pay anybody out? Well, here it is. There is $1.2 million in the USDT pool, and there is $1.2 million worth of HNT in there. So you can do this maths yourself. Go in at any time, whenever you feel like it, look at the price, multiply it by the amount of HNT, and it'll come to 1.2 million. Exactly the same as the 1.2 here. There's always a little bit of slight overlap. So the total pool is $2.5 million. So there's $2.5 million worth of fluctuation in the assets. So if you buy and sell, that's what you get. This figure here, $172,000, actually tells you that that's how many trades have gone through today, $172,000 compared to $1.2 million. So there's plenty there. Here's what also happens. As this grows and more people become a part of this, and larger transactions are done, what will happen is the liquidity pool will increase. It has to. Because if there's, for example, $1 million a day in trade volume, you need a lot more liquidity. But that gives whoever runs the liquidity pool to be able to say, okay, we'll put more in. What's the benefit of being in a liquidity pool? Every single transaction you do, whether it's a buy or a sell, has a fee included. Somebody is actually putting money into this pool because they get a portion of that fee. So you can see, this is a system that works in so many different ways. Now, in HyperNation, let's just run a crazy scenario. What if Hyperbond is used in a similar sort of way where you're staking it and you're going to receive portions of fees. Now suddenly the hyper bond that people are selling off here for like ridiculous amounts are now earning something, and more than likely another coin or possibly HNT. Look, there's people here thinking, you know what, this is good. I'll go, oh, sorry, this is HNT. But if you go and do a transaction in your HyperNation account, so let's say you've got 50 HND and you convert it to HNT, that transaction comes up here. You can actually watch your transaction appear. So on here, it tells you there's been 444 transactions. 347 of them are buys and 97 are sells. Now that's a good ratio. That's nearly I would say about a 3.5 to 1. So for every one sell, there are 3.5 buys, which is good, because that means there are always more buyers than there are sellers. There might be days when there are more sellers than buyers, but that's just the way this works. I mean, if you look at this, the price here, somebody sold $6,492 worth, and the price didn't fluctuate that much, about 1 cent, which is not a major amount. And the reason why companies now like swaps is because with liquidity, there's always a buyer and there's always a seller, because it's a pool of money that's constantly fluctuating. Every time a new sale goes through, the price of this moves up tiny amounts. That's why you don't get massive movements unless somebody does a massive buy order. Well, let's have a look at this. Let's go back to when HNT first hit the market, which was 25th of August. So it hasn't been that many days. We're on the 12th of September, so probably about 2 weeks, probably 2.5 weeks. And look at what's happened. It's on an upward line, because what happened was people are constantly buying and converting. So here's an interesting thing that I put together literally about 5 minutes before the call. So now let's look at strategies. So here's a strategy. What if when you do your go into your HyperNation account and you're receiving whatever it is each day, and you decide, what do I do with it? Do I do a rebuy or do I do a swap into HNT? And this is where strategy comes into it. So these are just made up figures just to give you an idea. So this is your account, and in your rewards, let's say you receive 100 HND daily. So what does that mean? 100 HND daily, I use these figures. 100 times 30 is 3,000. So you're receiving 3,000 HND per month. So here's what you can do. Because don't forget, you don't just want to keep doing rebuys. Let's wean ourselves off this idea of constantly doing rebuys to build this huge balance. For what? Let's be a little bit more clever about it. Let's say you use 1,000 is used to do rebuys. So 1,000 times 3 equals 3,000. So what's happened so far? 3,000 has come in. So your balance has dropped from 15,000 on according to this down to 12. But you used 1,000 to do rebuys, which puts it back up at 15,000. So you've only used 1,000 out of the 3,000. That leaves a balance of 2,000. What do you do with it? Well, you can use it to buy HNT. You could do it every day. You could do it every week. That strategy you make yourself. You can either withdraw some, change it into different tokens, coins, etc. But this is what you can use to either withdraw or speculate. Now, why don't we increase this to get a big number for pending rewards? Well, I'll tell you the reason why I don't. And the reason is, think of this as if it was a shop. And you've got 15,000 stock, could be anything, could be cans of Coke. What difference would it make to your business if you had 40,000 cans of Coke? Nothing at all. Okay, this would increase your rewards daily by a bit. But this is where you're missing the trick. What if HNT keeps on its upward trajectory? Because don't forget, in 2.5 weeks, it's gone up by a good 50–60%. And this is where you have to put your thinking hat on and think, well, hang on a minute. If I do that, it's whatever I rebuy is over a much longer period. Whereas if I use some of my balance to buy HNT and just sit there, if you don't want to withdraw it or swap it, that's fine too. You can just let it sit there and wait. And suddenly, now you're using your strategy correctly. You're using the option to keep your balance at whatever level, just to keep your account ticking over. Ticks over nicely and everything's fine. As long as you don't let this figure go to zero, you're okay. And you can then decide what to do with your daily rewards. You can exchange on a daily basis into HNT and just let it sit there. But there's a double win to this. If you do that, or more of us do that, guess what happens? This goes even higher because there are way more buyers than there are sellers. And it's funny, if you look at this, you can see this, it's today, now, currently, it's going up. And then somebody comes in and sneaks in the odd sell. But that's okay too. You have to have both. You can't just have all buyers and you can't just have all sellers either. But if you track this, then if you look through it, there's certain times in the day when there are a whole batch of reds go through, and that's a load of selling pressure. Happens every day. I don't know what time exactly, but it does happen every day. So it could be really strategic in the way you look after your account, what you do, build up your rewards, and then if you work out that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon every day, a whole load of people come in and sell, that's the time when you want to buy, because that's when the price goes down. And then you wait, and if you wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, not only will you cover any costs that you have for selling and swapping, etc., but you're now sitting on an asset called HyperNation token, which is increasing in value. So I'll tell you what I did. When I saw this happening, and I was probably late to the game, but hey, better late than never. At about $1.30, I started to convert my assets and convert them into HNT. And I just kept converting on a regular basis. And at some point, I'll then stop and I'll do a few rebuys to keep my balance at a certain level. That means that I've been buying at a lower level and it's gone up by 36 cents in between. So this is where, using strategies makes all the difference. It's not just building rewards. It's about strategizing. But here's what's interesting. We talked about this company called Evergrande and what Bank of America are doing. How does that even tie into this? Well, what it does in a way, because at the moment, you've got inflation, you've got utility bills going up, you've got all these issues that the world is going through. Now you've got the option to take your assets and make them grow in value, and they're not connected to this other world at all, because we're in control of HNT. Its price is creeping up slowly, bit by bit. So if your utility bills are going up, HNT is going up too. So we don't know where the world will go with this. But the point is, you're almost counteracting what's happening in the world just by looking at what's available within the system. And the good thing now, what they've done is they've added in things like community points. So you have to log in. If they'd run a competition, you have to retweet things, which is no different to what you would do anyway. But now what we need to do is we need to change the mindset we were taught in the past, which is go in and do big rebuys and build a huge balance. What does it achieve? Not a lot. But here's the thing. What if suddenly loads and loads of people suddenly start joining HyperNation? What will happen to HNT? It will start moving up because people will be converting into it. And then suddenly the HNT that you were sitting on, that you bought for maybe $1, 10, 20, 30, has now increased. And it could increase a lot, but it could go down too, because somebody might come in and do a lot of selling. But let's even look at that. What would drive the price down? Well, if there are lots of people, let's say, for example, 10,000 people are in HyperNation, the first thing is they bought a citizen welfare package, they log in every day, they earn their rewards, but it's taking quite a few days before they can do either a rebuy or a withdrawal. So they've got to wait that time. So over that period of time, lots of people will be still doing rebuys, etc. So what's happening is the price is creeping up because there's nobody ready to sell, because there's nothing there to sell, because they've only just started. So there's always a delay. So in a way, you can almost take advantage of the delay, because everybody waits at the end of the day to withdraw. When we work for a whole month, then we get paid at the end of the month. We've still got to wait for that too. So it's no different. It's understanding what's actually going on in the background, using it to your advantage, and making it work for you. Now suddenly you've got HNT. We still don't know what's going to happen with HB, and that's going to be the interesting one. If that suddenly turns into a staking token for all sorts of different things, then suddenly you have another stream where you're getting another token, or maybe even HNT. Or maybe you get HND and you've got to convert it into HNT. There's multiple options of what they can do with Hyperbond. But I think it's definitely worth reading what Hyperbond is, what HyperNation token is, and seeing how they both connect. Because there is a connection, 100%. Then you'll see that there's a lot more interesting things at play. And you can see from just what I've shown you now, that there's a lot of interesting things that these guys have put together to almost get rid of issues from the past. So now nobody can say, well, hang on, there's not enough there to pay. Well, there's $1.2 million sitting there. Can somebody come in and sell $1.2 million worth of HNT? They could do if they had it, but at the moment, nobody has it. Because we don't have these huge players at the moment. And because you can only buy one passport and you can only log in as one person, what then happens? There are no multiple accounts. So nobody's draining that $1.2 million pool overnight because they've suddenly come in with a huge batch of money. And that's the interesting part about this. And the NFT is the passport. Don't forget, one thing to always remember. Number one, you got to buy a passport, otherwise you can't join. So that's your first thing. When somebody says, what are you doing? Say, well, firstly, you got to buy a passport, otherwise you can't join. To me, that's a big plus. Because now you're saying this is good enough that if you don't have this, you can't have what's in behind the door. And then you've got your rewards and everything else. And now You don't own the account. Your NFT owns the account. You are the controller. So if somebody asks you, what do you do? I'll tell you what I do. I'm a remote worker. I work for my NFT. So it's making it, it's making it sort of exclusive to NFT holders, which is great. Because when they sort of expand on this and open up a new planet or new piece of land or whatever, then that new piece of land or that new planet will have a whole new set of NFTs. And we'll be able to go in there, and maybe Hyperbond is a part of that. And so is HyperNation token, and so is HND. Because now, if you want access to that, they might turn around and say, well, stake some of your HNT and some of your HB, and we'll allow you access to this planet. We're going to mint some NFTs, and you'll be the first in the door. So everything is based on, you give us something, we'll give you something. And then those NFTs could be worth literally all sorts. And you might find there's another income stream on that planet. Now suddenly you're building ridiculous amounts of different options of income streams and lots of things that you can build from. So let me just stop the recording.